Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I was very lucky to get to go to design snowboarding conferences. Definitely a huge perk. I know we're working on the slides. There you go. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you all about a topic that I am very passionate about, been wrestling with for a long time. Thank you so much, Albert, for inviting me to come share some of the things that I've been working on. Before we jump in, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I always forget to introduce myself at these things. I currently am VP of Design and Research at AltoPharmacy, which is a late-stage startup that has been focused on disrupting the U.S. pharmacy industry. And the way that they've been doing that is by streamlining the prescription management process from the doctor's office to your front door. So really trying to take the complexity and pain out of pharmacy. Not an easy task. But my real claim to fame, as Albert mentioned, is that I had the privilege of founding and leading the Design Sprint Leadership Academy at Google. I was at Google for about 10 years, and during that time, I got to run this as a bit of a passion project alongside the other work that I was doing. I was a UX designer on search, and I helped found and create the design advocacy vertical within developer relations. Anyway, ChatGPT can tell you a lot more about my background if you want. So let's jump into what I've kind of been wrestling with. Last February was not the first time that design thinking has been declared dead. So not new news, and there's lots of articles out there right now lamenting the failure of design thinking. And so some of you are probably thinking, why are we still talking about design thinking? Even Bruce Nussbaum declared design thinking dead in 2011, 3 years after it started. And Tim Brown himself posed the question back in 2015, even before we started the Design Sprint Academy. Was it still relevant now that everyone had kind of absorbed it into their way of working? So looking at a lot of these complaints and what people are criticizing about design thinking, really, a lot of it is centered around this idea that there could be a foolproof process, something that's guaranteed to deliver results that anybody can do, kind of like the democratization of design. The premise is, okay, we're all creative people. Design thinking will allow us to leverage the power of these methodologies and deliver results if we just empathize hard enough. But part of the problem here is that it's been presented as this kind of silver bullet and that design could save the world. And if we look back at kind of the origins of the kind of design thinking practice, I've done a bunch of research into the history of design thinking, and recently actually came across this one, which I didn't know, is that the how might we, which is kind of the staple of design thinking, was not actually invented at IDEO. How many of you are familiar with the how might we? A few folks, okay, many of you probably have even used it. And so it's interesting. It came from a creative manager who was working at Procter & Gamble back in the 70s. And he was working on how to innovate and create the next bar of soap, the next product that would rival Irish Spring. And what he found and what he discovered by working with his team was that the team was asking the wrong question. They kept focusing in on how they could compete with this product that was already out in market. And the way that they were framing their questions was very much around these things like, can we, what would it look like? And so he started by using why questions, like the 5 whys is a methodology that maybe a lot of you are familiar with, and asking, why are we trying so hard to make another green striped soap? Does the world really need another green striped soap? What is it that soap actually delivers to people? What is the user need that we're solving here? And so he came back with this premise of refreshment, Soap is trying to give you this refreshing experience. That's what's actually different about Irish Spring, not just getting you clean. And he framed it as a how might we? How might we make a more refreshing soap? So that is more of a mindset than even a methodology. It's just a way of thinking. And through our language and the terminology that we use, he was able to unlock creativity, change the way you start to problem solve. Now, Charles Warren worked with him at Procter & Gamble, brought it to IDEO, and eventually brought it to Google. So it's kind of interesting how these trickled through without necessarily being a codified methodology until around 2008, when Harvard Business Review published the first article on design thinking. Tim Brown had just published, or was just publishing Change by Design right around that same time. And even here it is presented as a way to transform the way you develop products, processes, services, strategies. You can apply it to everything. This is going to be that cure-all that's going to save the world. And what's interesting is how common it is now today. And if we look at things like Harvard Business School now teaches design thinking and innovation in their curriculum, Stanford does too. So while it was first introduced back then, now it has actually very much been absorbed into the way that we work. Personally, back at that time, 2008, I was studying design at the California College of the Arts in San Francisco, and I wasn't having great success getting buy-in for design thinking. I studied with an IDEO product design leader, learned all about these great methodologies, design research, empathy building, journey mapping. We interviewed folks on projects, and it was fantastic. When I took it back to my job at Yahoo, my product management partners were like, we don't have time for that. I can't do a 5-month research project here. You're already taking too long as it is. Design is already too slow. So I had a lot of trouble being able to put the user and the customer at the center of the process. Schedules were packed. Really, the currency of our working practice was a 30-minute meeting, right? This is what we were all reduced to. And so looking at a way in which we could actually squeeze these kind of practices into a product development timeline was really critical. A little bit before, the British Design Council published the Double Diamond. And so this was really for the UX and design community, not presented more broadly as like, here's a tool for everyone to use. It was more about codifying this practice. We referenced it a lot, designers and in the design community. And the core that I found really useful with this framing of the design and innovation process is the diverge and converge concept here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this was also out in the general milieu or philosophy of what we were doing. When I got to Google in 2011, I continued to kind of bang my head against the product development timelines, engineering-driven culture, had a really hard time getting the strategic context that we were working in, making time to really, apply a principled process. And I met a woman who was working with Google X, and running design sprints with Jake Knapp and Charles Warren, and I had the opportunity to start running these workshops or these design sprints with her, and working to develop the methodology, codify the methodology. And a lot of people make fun of our triple diamond because they say, well, you really need a third diamond on there. But we felt that the double diamond wasn't prescriptive enough. It was missing the rapid prototyping, the testing, the things that we needed to do to de-risk a project. We were also trying to make it something that was very repeatable and that you could guarantee results from. And I kind of smile when I say that because guaranteeing results is always tricky and dangerous. But that was how we were able to get design sprints adopted, get people to start using them we can deliver results in 3 days. We can deliver results in 5 days, the magic 5-day design sprint from Google Ventures. And really, not only were we able to deliver results faster, which is what everybody wanted, we were also, as a team, able to get the benefits, the kind of floofy, soft benefits that people talk about. We were able to build shared knowledge as a team, shared vocabularies, and build stronger relationships, all the things that come from working together, having real, concrete, difficult conversations. And so design sprints were actually really quite different to me than design thinking, but it really made the space to bring design thinking methodologies into our practice. And if this was 2019, I would be up here talking to you about my future vision sprint model and sharing the case studies from the 5 different organizations that I ran the sprint model with over that year. And part of one of the things that I was doing at that time at Google was developing these repeatable frameworks and models that people could take and run. And I still reference this pretty regularly. It's got a checklist of really great methods, and I'm super jealous of JR and being a futurist. It's one of those things I aspire to one day, being able to really think that far into the future and imagine where we're going, as well as design that future. So that methodology was based on this idea of just get everybody in a room together. We'll work it out. We've got a structured process. We can make the conversations happen. And then 2020 happened, and we all had to retreat into our little Zoom boxes. My community of sprint leaders, we all just rushed to rapidly develop remote sprinting methods. We onboarded Mural and FigJam, put all the tools together, trained everyone, and we were able to deliver the outputs, the artifacts, but it seemed harder in a lot of ways. There was Zoom fatigue. You weren't actually all being in a room together. A virtual room is not really the same as an actual room. And we weren't gaining the improved communication. We weren't gaining the stronger working relationships, the shared perspectives. We were walking away with artifacts. So I started to think, okay, this is not the best toolkit. This is not the best tool in my toolbox. People started going back to work a couple years ago. It's been about 2 years now. I've run in-person design sprints. But what's really interesting is these tools like FigJam, maybe many of you guys use them, use it. It's an amazing tool. And everyone's really familiar with it now. We have people, I even have my business development partner who uses it to visualize problems and customer journeys. So it's an incredible tool. It's reduced a lot of the work that I have to do after a sprint to compile all the information and create the output. But what's happened is now when we get together in person, we're all sitting around a table staring into computers, which to me is like crazy. I'm like, where's the energy? Where's the excitement? Where's the fun? We're not standing at a whiteboard, drawing things out together and having those conversations. We're inputting it into a device. So when I reflect back on that, thinking about, is this the best tool for me today? What are we really trying to accomplish? And did we overpromise what design sprints could do, even at the beginning, kind of like design thinking, this idea that it's a silver bullet and will solve all problems. And I trained people not just in product development and engineering, but in all kinds of different spaces, like journalists and teachers, and I had the opportunity to go work with a lot of people trying to give them access to this methodology. So I really do believe that structured collaboration is beneficial to everybody. But, does it have to be done synchronously in person? These are questions that I ask myself pretty regularly. This framework is really made up of methods. And this is one of my slides from my training deck. I was thinking, okay, these methods are all still valuable. These are all still related to design thinking. They are actually pulled from traditional UX practice, business strategy, psychology. These are all the tools that we had, and we would empower our sprint facilitators, our sprint leaders, to develop their own recipe. Take these ingredients, customize your workshop, customize your sprint based on your needs, based on your team, and so they're still useful today. It's just a question of how we're using them and how we're putting them together. So over the last couple of years, I personally have been very narrowly focused on this part of the product development journey. And I know a lot of folks here don't do product development, they're not in product development, but maybe some of this will be helpful for you, just thinking about how teams work, how we push products out. And you'll see there's no diverge, converge here. We're just get that out as fast as we can. A lot of where that's happening is before, with the discovery, the user research, the journey mapping, the problem framing. We'll do problem framing later today. And then what's happening after with measuring, refining, revisiting, revising. So this is kind of a simplified view of a lot of what I do today. And I'd still bring these principles from design thinking to that work. So I'm going to share 5 of them with you. The first, I mentioned the diverge, converge. This is kind of really the core of design thinking practice. And it is about starting by creating a whole range of choices, really opening up your thinking, and not narrowing down too soon and picking the first solution that you can think of to your challenge or your problem. And in some instances, even reframing the problem, asking the question, are we solving the right problem? So this can be pretty uncomfortable for a lot of people. When you're out at the ends of that diverge, people get nervous. Are we ever coming back? Why are we wasting our time? We're talking about all these crazy ideas. People are slicing up brains. You know, you're just like out there at the edges of the universe. And so part of what an established framework can do is say, we're going to bring you back in. Don't worry. And get ready, because I'm going to force you to make a decision. And so what we have dot voting and different democratic methods to actually force a decision. And one of my favorite stories is when I got to go to the factory with Tom Chi in San Francisco, and they have a room in the bottom of the factory where it's like a vault from an old mint, and they put people in with a timer. In 5 minutes, that light's going out. If you don't make a decision, you're going to be stuck in the dark. So different ways you can force these things. The other principle that, people always made fun of me for saying, a shared brain? What does that mean, Kai? We're all using one brain? But I really think about how important it is as a team working on something to align on a shared understanding of the problem space. And part of how that comes together is when you bring cross-functional perspectives, you bring in subject matter experts, people from outside of the space that you're in, even marketing, data science, and you can build this shared understanding of what you're trying to solve for and where the opportunities are. And then as you're working together, you have that reference, and you're not constantly opening up discussions about, well, did we look at this and did we look at that? You kind of bring in the whole data set, and everybody becomes familiar with that data set together, and then you're making decisions faster. The other thing that's really important is making an idea real. And we saw that with Jair's example earlier. When they learned a lot when they started prototyping and testing. And so the more that you can take an idea and make it concrete, show really specifically what's going to happen, let people feel it, not just decision makers and stakeholders, but also users, then you start to tease out early red flags about things that are going to get in the way. How real is this? Can we actually do this? And so that's one of the premises also of design thinking. And you'll probably have seen pictures of people at the D school like lying on the floor prototyping an idea, because any idea will live in space and time somewhere for real humans. Okay. The other thing is never mistake a guess for a validated solution. Smart people will make great guesses, but all ideas, product solutions are a hypothesis until you've tested it. And very often we get stuck in our own perspective, and we think, oh, this is great, it's really going to solve that problem. But you have a lot of assumptions that are lying underneath it. And so this is one of the tools that I injected into our framework and our process, was taking the time to say, what are we assuming or guessing actually has to be real in order for this to work? And so from that, you can then say, well, let's go test it. Let's get a signal. Let's figure out, is this true or is this not true? And so taking that time, and then that will help inform your experiment or what you actually end up prototyping and testing. After that, test, iterate, Can't reinforce that more, but it's really important to get out and test with a large enough sample of people, whatever it is that you're building. One of the things that I've struggled with a little bit is how do you test something out that is longer term, like a long-term vision in which you are designing something for the future world. We've talked a lot about that today and yesterday. So really getting to the crux of the pain point that it's solving. Who is it for? Who is going to be that customer, that user? And is there a real pain point that you're going to be solving in this new future? So we did and still do prototyping on future visions. All right. So that was kind of a deconstruction of methodologies that I've used and built over time. Design sprints, you can call them what you want, but that's a core set of principles that I leverage in the work that I do. But I've also been trying out some other tools, and so I wanted to share those with you. One is I've been wrestling a lot with this idea of a vision, and whenever I've joined a new organization, the designers always come to me and say, we need an aligned vision. We don't have an aligned vision. And then I'll go talk to my product managers and they'll say, what do you mean? I think we all know what we're doing. I don't want to sit around and write some useless words. Let's just keep going. And so there's this disconnect between what is a vision, what do you need it for? I've recently discovered Marty Kagan. I'm maybe a little late to the game there, but he has a whole blog article on product vision versus company vision. And one of the things that I think is it's a really important distinction to make. A product vision, it's not just a set of words or a statement, but it's a concept or a mental model that will help you to see what that future state looks like. And in that future state, what will things be? Like, so for example, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Eve Bahar's One Laptop for Every Child initiative, but that concept, one laptop for every child, helps you to see very easily and understand we need a durable, inexpensive machine that we can then distribute to all kids in the world. And they can make product decisions on a daily basis based on that simple statement. We are trying to get one laptop into every child's hand. Another one that we had at Coinbase, which was interesting, is this anyone with an idea for a Web3 product or a decentralized app will have access to customers from the first day. And so that was a statement that we could work with that would inform, well, how do we fit it into our current retail product, our current crypto trading product, for example. But these statements are not these kind of more lofty, inspirational ones like you might have for a company vision. And a lot of people will say, I don't want to take that time and exercise to write down words that won't have meaning and relevance to me on a daily basis. So really thinking about what are those concepts that will hold that you can drive towards as you're making daily decisions. The other tool that I was introduced to by Marty Kagan and Audrey Crane at Design Map is this concept of a vision type. I was talking to a friend and I was saying, I just need somebody to build me a prototype, an example that shows this idea, because even though I'm a designer, I really want it to function. And he's like, well, you're familiar with vision types, right? And I was like, no, what is that? And he's like, well, it's a strategic prototype. It's not just a prototype that shows how things are going to work, but it's really like a strategic perspective. So I started digging into this, and I was like, oh, hey, this is pretty cool. But I've kind of been doing this for a while now. Like, design is a great tool for illustrating a product and what it could be in the future. So what's really different here? And I think the key, and I'll show you just a couple of projects, but it's not just the artifact itself or the prompt. So for example, I ran a workshop with the American Beverage Association focused on how we could help and collaborate with large beverage brands to encourage and increase recycling behavior. And we did a lot of work problem framing, trying to figure out like what could we do, how do we integrate into people's lives. This is a very simple mock that shows how you could actually engage with people in the moment, not through an ad campaign or a marketing campaign, but something that just says, hey, you're holding a plastic bottle there, recycle this. So this isn't a full vision type, but it's like a prompt. It says, okay, this is where it could be. And there are lots of other ways it might be presented into your life. And part of what we looked at is, where are those entry points? Because we know, sure, we could do marketing campaigns, but that doesn't make a big difference. So how do you present to people at the right moment where they can take action? So for example, you could use Lens to learn more about the type of material that this bottle is and where how to recycle it. Plastic, polyethylene, is it PET1? Is it, what, I can't even remember the terms. I learned way too much about recycling in this sprint. But there's a lot of complexity here. Apparently not every recycling center recycles the same way, and I'm sure it's totally different here too. And so, there could be ways in which it's easily findable on maps, or it's localized information to where you live, and do you take the cap off or not take the cap off? Do you crush the can or not crush the can? All those kind of things. So this is getting into the details, not complete journey maps and like narratives, but shows you how it could present itself. I've been using it at Alto. We have been building out a bigger vision for how to improve the patient experience with our patient app. We recently launched an improvement to the medication management process, so improved how you could search for and find medication to order, really optimizing for people who have complex use cases, multiple medications, manage family accounts, things like that. And one of the things that really helped us was creating this sort of interactive prototype that we could share with folks across the company and help them see what were we really solving for. Because a lot of times in the words or the slogans or the description of the project, people didn't really understand what the pain point was. So we've got more coming there in the next couple weeks, improved experiences. And Google was really, really good at this. When I worked at Google, we made a lot of vision types. So when I look back retroactively after, talking to Audrey and, trying to understand what's different about this vision type, I realized one of the currency for UX design leaders at Google is a vision deck, a beautiful vision deck, which has an incredible narrative and paints this future state of what the product could be. But where it was really helpful was when it got into the details. So here's an example of, I worked on search for 4 years. This is what search looked like in 2013 when I was working on it. We had an initiative to beautify search and to think about mobile as a new form factor. At the time, it was primarily focused on desktop, and we thought, wow, with this new form factor, we could really push our thinking. And these are some really early stage mocks that were reimagining, how you could create more human parsable search results. You'll see today we are closer to this now than we were to what we were before. But bringing this idea of more white space, that you might want to have things that were more, sort of cleanly organized in cards. These were things that we explored. This is what was launched afterwards on desktop, significantly simplified from the previous view, and really thinking about, we don't need that left-hand nav, we don't need that right-hand bar, which is kind of crazy when you think about like a company being able to trim down, because mostly what you do is add more things on. And so we got here through a number of vision decks, vision types, prototypes, experiments, many, many things over like at least a year. But as I was putting this together, and I was like, I'm standing up here telling people, just go out there and make designs. Designs are really the thing that you need to illustrate your vision. And I had this moment where I was thinking, well, that was kind of the problem that I was facing when I first got to Google, where I was like making mock after mock after mock because I didn't have access to like the strategic perspective, what we were driving towards, what were all the bigger, higher level factors that I was trying to account for in my designs, and felt very much like just a pair of hands. And so that's definitely not what I'm proposing here in any way. At one point in time, we even measured the success of design sprints by the reduction of the number of mocks you'd have to make to get to a decision. Because we'd come in and we'd say, what about this? What about this? What about that? And so by getting everyone together ahead of the design, aligning everyone, we could just deliver one prototype, one design. So what I think is different here is about creating a strategic perspective. Having designers actually come with a strategic perspective and not just be in the role of illustrating somebody else's idea. But I also realize that if you don't have a designer, which I'm at a startup right now, and we have limited resources, and I hear this question all the time. If you don't have a researcher, if you don't have a designer, what do I do? It can be challenging. You're trying to illustrate a vision, where you're trying to go, trying to keep all your team aligned, get that idea out the door. But you are going to need somebody to build it and execute on it. And so the sooner that you have the person who actually has the capability, the sooner they're brought into the conversation, the sooner that they can bring that perspective and leverage the power of design. I think it's really interesting to think about what AI is going to do for us here. You can generate mocks really, really quickly now. There's a number of tools, UX Copilot, UIZard, where you can go without any design training and put together a flow and a user interface. So that's one place to start, but that doesn't mean that designers are not still part of the equation. So I'm not advocating for the dissolution of my role. What we're really still trying to get to is the center of that Venn diagram between what's desirable for a customer and end user, what's feasible from like a technology perspective or what a company can actually build, and then what would actually be profitable for them. So that's still at the center of all of it. One more tool that I have spent a lot of time developing or learning to use, not personally developing, is more document-driven collaboration. And there are companies and people who really love to read and love to write. So I'm a designer, I love pictures, but documents are a super accessible, easy tool for everyone to use. You don't have to have design skills. And maybe some of you are familiar with the Amazon 6-pager. The leadership right now at my startup, at my company, are primarily from Amazon. And so we have been using this document-driven collaboration technique, and I've been learning about it for like the last year. There's a couple great things about it. And these are like the 6 core principles when you're writing a doc. The idea is, this is a press release, this is a future press release. We're casting ourselves into the future, imagining what we might say when we launch this product. That's not a new idea, but even more than it just being a press release, in some instances, it's more of like the early stage proposal. The most important part of this document ends up being the FAQ, and that's where you kind of actually will stage a debate with yourself about the ideas you've just presented and all the things that might be not working well with them. So anyway, interesting tool. A couple final things, principles that I've worked with and found really useful. I think a lot about facilitators and design sprint leaders as conductors. when you're trying to get a team all aligned and working together to create a project or a product, it's really about having that person, that directly responsible individual who is able to coordinate and bring all of these, curate the content, coordinate the conversations, push the difficult conversations, and be responsible for getting everyone over the finish line and making the magic happen. And then the really hard part, defining impact and developing metrics. And I really enjoyed the conversation yesterday about, measurement, and how you can lose sight of what you're really working towards, the customer experience, when you start to suffer from metric myopia, where you get so focused on moving the number that it is meant to measure your success that you forget what the real picture is. And Peter Drucker has a great quote around this. People often end up measuring and managing things that are no longer relevant to that real goal that they're working towards. So I feel like I wrestle with this on a daily basis. CSAT, NPS, these are the things that we think about when we're trying to measure experience and, how are we making things better for users, for customers. They're very lagging metrics and hard to connect to critical, KPIs, business. Are we actually really driving more revenue? So just want to call that out. It's important to wrestle with it and do the best that you can. All right. So whatever you call this, product development, facilitated creative collaboration was what somebody proposed to me recently, some of my design sprint community folks. I was like, wow, that's a mouthful. Radical collaboration, radical inquiry, that's a whole practice in and of itself. Design swarms is another one I have a friend who runs. They're super fun. Design storms. I don't think anybody wants storms. Everyone wants outcomes. Rapid iterative prototyping, radical iterative vision typing, whatever you call it. When you give it a name, it gives you the ability to sell it, get buy-in for it, inject it into your process. And what design thinking did give us was a permission to put the customer, the user, at the center of what we were doing. And we don't really need that permission anymore today. We're all here at a conference around customer experience. We all take this as a given. Amazon, Google, both put the user at the center, all else will follow. So what do we need permission for today? And I leave that as a question for all of you. Is it to put humanity at the center? Is it to put our ecosystem, our planet? Most of the time, we're putting the customer at the center because we've been able to see that it will drive business impact, drive results for our companies. But these things are difficult, and we are all responsible for making things better in the world. So I think about that on a daily basis, and encourage you all to think about what you need permission for, and how to put the best work out there that you can. So thank you.
That's awesome, Kai. Thanks a lot. We have time for a couple of questions, but I'm going to ask one first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Mine's an easy one. The stuff that you were talking about, have you seen examples of it used for employee experience, like making the employee experience better? And how would you fit some of that stuff in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, employee experience, I worked on that at Google for a while. I worked on a UX, centralized UX org that was all about improving the UX function, UX designers and researchers experience. So you can use it for really understanding what the key problems are, identifying opportunities, journey mapping, all that kind of stuff can be applied there as well. And the best part about employees is you have access to them, so you can test things quickly. You can get early feedback on things. I love it when you have access to your customers and your users. So yeah, it's a great premise.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, anybody else have any questions out there? The light's shining right by. Okay, one over here.
One of your slides referenced in facilitation who shouldn't be a facilitator.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that.
Who should be a facilitator?
Well, I know I had a whole bunch more I was going to say there, and I kept looking at that clock thinking, I'm running out of time. So I say who shouldn't because in any kind of sort of democratic working process, you're trying really hard to flatten out roles, and people who are like the decision makers will often bias the whole conversation. And so you certainly don't want that person to be facilitating, coordinating, because it's basically like just telling everybody what to do. UX researchers, UX designers are really good at this role because they're asking a lot of questions, really trying to make space for these conversations and voices. At Google, we had UX program managers, which are people who are really great at like creating strategic programs for running projects. You would think they're project managers, but they're really running projects at scale. And that's probably not a really common function, but yeah, people who are particularly good at herding cats.
Well, I just want to say one thing, like when you're talking about facilitators, I was actually thinking when you were talking, like when like Zoo has a department or whatever called Zoo Academy, and we actually do like some design thinking training. We do research, we do facilitation. And so if you're looking for a good facilitator, shameless plug, you could maybe talk to people at our office for that. So, and I think that Kai, like, probably inspired us to do that. You know, when Albert came back from the Google Sprint thing, we were kind of talking about it for a little while, and then COVID hit, and then we kind of had to reinvent some things. So I think that's where we kind of started. So indirectly, you've inspired us to do a lot more stuff than we were doing in the past. That's great. Okay, once again, let's thank Kai for speaking here today. That was awesome.